Good evening. Welcome to another podcast. After doing the blog, the October blog, then the response was quite good. So I thought to myself, do another few blogs. I mean, a few people said to me, I suppose it's a sign of the times. Rather than having to read things, people like listening to things. You can do it when you're driving your car, wherever. Some people are on the road when they're at work. I suppose it's just easier. It's a bit of a reflection of the sign of the times, really. Everything's all about convenience, and I mean, listening's a bit lazier than reading, isn't it? But well, that's just how it is, I suppose. But there we go. So yeah, I thought I'd do a few more podcasts about a few different things. I mean, it's a strange pastime. Carp fishing is. I mean, what you got to remember about carp fishing is it's full of egos, isn't it? I mean, let's be honest. Carp fishing is full of egos. And I suppose bait's the same, although I wouldn't really say that I'd do anything for an ego trip. My buzz is all about creating baits, seeing what they catch, creating baits that help people catch big carp, and I am more centered on big fish because let's be totally honest about carp fishing. Nobody gets into carp fishing and thinks to themselves, I'm just going to be happy catching 10-pounders or 15-pounders for the rest of the time I'm going to be carp fishing. Every time I've ever gone carp fishing, ever since I first started, I've always wanted to catch the biggest. And most lakes that I've ever fished, I've always had the target in my mind to catch the biggest fish in the lake, and you go through a progression, don't you? You go through a progression where, I can remember probably, let's say, I don't know, getting on for 30 years ago. And all I wanted to do 30 years ago was probably catch as many carp as I could. And then it went to catching your first 20, and etc. And it just progresses, and for me personally, every time I go on a lake, unless it's somewhere that I'm just fishing for a bit of fun and a few bites, then most of the time I've got a target in mind. And as I've progressed over the years, because I've always made my own bait, very, 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 very few carp that I've caught over the years have been caught on baits that I haven't made. I have caught carp on maggots, even fishing for big carp on maggots. Caught a few on peanuts. And that's about it, really. Never been a tiger hunt user. So yeah, I mean, I've caught them on bread as well, obviously off the surface and stuff, and sometimes free line bread in the margins and things like this. But what I've noticed over the years, because I've been doing this a long time, is there's always seemed to have been a bait route towards catching the biggest fish in the lake. Now, some people think that's rubbish. I don't personally, because of what I've done, and what my bait's done, and what I know about what I'm feeding to the carp. So I've always had the belief that you can improve your chances of catching the biggest fish in the lake by tailoring your bait towards catching big fish. Sometimes that'll be as a result of knowledge that you've gained from other waters or theories that you've got. And other times it can be on studying capture history, because one fish in particular that I've caught, and I caught it a few times, was the result of studying the capture history of that fish, because it was quite a friendly fish. It wasn't an hard fish to catch. It lived in a big lake, but it certainly came out a lot more than all the other fish. But it just didn't seem to like the super orange very much. It did get caught on the super orange, But when I came up with the Red Devil, it just seemed to love that bait. And you've probably heard me speak about it before, because I thought that fish had got a thing for wheat. Wheat is a source of opioid peptides. I think that fish had got some sort of addiction or attachment, if you like, to wheat. So that was the idea I came up with, to catch this fish. And I told quite a lot of people that I would catch this fish on this bait, the Red Devil. And I did. Caught that fish 3 times using that bait. The first time I caught it, it was a low weight, spawned out in the middle of summer. It was 26.5, but I caught it as big as 33 pound. And every time it was using that Red Devil bait. I only caught it once using the Red Devil as the only bait, but every time the other 2 times I caught it, it was on a Red Devil hook bait and Match Stats pop up over a mixture of baits, because obviously once I caught it, although it was a small weight, it was a low weight when I caught it, which I've done loads of times over the years. I've caught big fish and they've been nowhere near at the top weights, but hey, that's how it goes sometimes. But yeah, I mean that fish, the Parrot Linear, it definitely had a thing for wheat. Some people dispute what I'm saying, but at the end of the day, the statistics don't lie. In the couple of years that bait was getting used on that lake, that fish got caught on that bait 14 times. So, statistics, they can't be argued with. Like I say, wasn't a difficult fish to catch in reality, not compared to a lot of the other fish in that lake. Big lake, 70 acres, there's fish in there that don't come out sometimes for a few years at a time. I think there's fish in there that probably haven't been caught for a long time, and probably some fish that have never been caught. But like I say, I feel I designed a bait to catch that fish, and it did catch that fish. But as I say, carp fishing, it's a strange old game. Everybody wants to be seen as being the daddy, if you like, catching the most fish or catching the biggest. And I've never really been that bothered with that aspect of it, to be honest with you. It's always been about me against the fish. And if I don't catch what I think I should be catching for the time that I'm doing, then there's only one person that I'll be cross with, and that'll be myself, because never done mountains of fishing. I haven't got a lot of time. I don't drive. Always done all right over the years catching fish. Had a few big fish, quite a few big fish, quite a few of the biggest fish on the lakes that I've fished, over the years. So that's why I think that I've got some idea about what you need to catch the biggest fish in your bait. And I'm talking about boilies, because there's tons and tons of big fish that get caught every year on plastic, maggots, tiger nuts, sweet corn, whatever. So boilies not the only bait, but here we are. There's people like me obsessed with bait, boilies, and we make some good baits. We make some good baits to catch big fish, consistently catch big fish from different waters that they get used on. So it's the same again. You can't really argue with the facts and the reality of what these baits catch. And I've spoke about it before on the other podcast that, it goes against all statistical probability that my bait should be catching these big fish, especially these 60-pounders that it's caught, when there's nobody else on the lake using the bait. So you've got lone anglers getting on there and they're catching these fish. Now, what I really want to talk about tonight is, as some of you will know, especially people who bought the first book from me, the Bait Anthology, I'm no longer an advocate of the HMV theory. And if anybody doesn't understand what HMV theory is, it's something that Fred Wilton came up with that basically stipulates that if you make a bait, a boilie in particular, that is a perfect match for a carp's nutritional requirements, then that bait will catch more fish. It'll be a better bait than one that doesn't satisfy all the carp's dietary requirements. Now, I don't believe this at all, particularly after making that bait for the Parrot Linear on Trentham. because that bait wasn't really what you would term an HMV bait. Although it was nutritional, it wasn't the perfect nutrition for a carp. It was a little bit low in protein because it was a bird food bait. A lot of vitamins in it, plenty of carbs, bit of fat, and a bit of protein, so they could live on it, no problem whatsoever. But it's not the ideal, perfect nutrition. Well, there you go. I mean, that parrot linear was, at one time, well, it was the biggest catchable fish in that lake. I wouldn't necessarily say it was the biggest fish in that lake, because I do believe that there's at least one or two fish bigger in that lake that haven't been caught. Maybe never been caught. Certainly not for a long time. But there we go. That was the biggest fish in that lake, and it had a thing for a bird food bait, which wasn't the perfect nutrition, although it was very attractive, very digestible. I personally think that it was down to the opioid peptide issue. That fish definitely seemed to have a gravitation towards baits that contained a lot of wheat. A lot of wheat. Now, you might ask yourself why you think that I still make HMV baits, high nutritional value baits, when I don't believe in the HMV theory. Well, there's a few reasons for this, to be honest with you. One of them is that I always try and make all the baits that I sell, all the boilies that I sell, as nutritional as possible, purely and simply for the benefits of the fish, because I would like to think that anyone who's using my bait is giving the fish some nutrition back for the pleasure of capturing them. You know, we're trying to catch these carp. The least we can do is give them some. The least we can do is give them some nutrition back. You know, it's a trade-off. They're getting caught, but it'd be nice to think that at least if they're eating the bait, it's doing them some good. So that's why, that's one of the reasons why I advocate. It's one of the reasons why I advocate a bait of high nutritional value. One time I did think that that bait would be better than something of low nutritional value, but I don't think that anymore. What made me mind up about that was the red devil and this big fish in Trenton. And then really, when you look at things like tiger nuts and sweet corn and maggots and other baits that are effective that aren't perfect nutrition for a carp, the HMV theory doesn't really stand up. And I've got lots of different ideas on that I'll be writing about in the next book. The next book that I'm gonna hopefully I've done for, I would say it's going to be the end of January next year. I mean, I've already done about 50 pages to that book, so there's already about 50 pages written. It's going to be much bigger than that, much bigger. So that's about where I am with that. Now, the same again, when I'm talking about these high nutritional value baits, and why I still make them. The other reason is because I do honestly believe that you cannot beat the attraction of certain ingredients that will make a high nutritional value bait. And it's the attraction. It's the attraction and the interaction of these opioid peptides, etc., that far outweighs any nutritional considerations I've got. Because fish meal is it's probably the most attractive ingredient that you can use in a bait. Fish meal is unbelievably attractive. Now, if you're using fish meal in a bait at a good level, a worthwhile level, then you're pretty much on the road towards making a high nutritional value bait. You know, you combine fish meal with things like whey proteins and yeasts and soya flours and casein or whatever else, or lots of different things. And the end result will be a high nutritional value bait. You know, it'll have enough protein in there for the fish. It'll have enough fat. Carbohydrates. I mean, carbohydrates is a funny one because technically speaking, carp don't really need to eat carbohydrates, but they can utilize them. And then obviously you've got the vitamins and the minerals. And we could talk about that at length, vitamins and minerals, because that's a big subject. That's a big subject. But I mean, minerals is not that important because, as I've spoke about before with the salt thing, carp are never really deficient in minerals. There's a possibility that they can be deficient in vitamins, certain ones. But there's lots of good ingredients that you can put in bait that will satisfy the demands. Now, I mean, another thing about this HMV theory is because another thing that it doesn't stand up to is because people can say they're making these perfect baits, perfectly designed to match the nutritional requirements of the carp. And I've done it in the past, and I still sell baits like that right now. But the thing is, how on earth can you actually discern that a carp is only eating that bait to know that it's good for it? Because let's be honest, let's take a 24-hour snapshot of a carp living in, let's say a 70-acre lake, a big lake like Trenton. Let's take a 24-hour snapshot of its dietary habits in one 24-hour period. Now, there could be lots of different baits going into that water. The carp could spend time in both ends of the lake. And you've got to factor in there the natural food that's in the lake. So let's say, for instance, that carp spends 4 hours in the north end of that lake. And in that 4 hours in the north end of the lake, it decides it's a little bit hungry and it decides to eat, I don't know, let's say 20 baby swan mussels. So that's 20 baby swan mussels. It's at that. So 4 hours up there, it's at 20 baby swan mussels. So 4 hours later, comes across an angler's bait. Let's say it's not particularly nutritional bait, but it's attractive. So it goes down there 4 hours later, and it eats, let's say, 100 baits, 118 mil baits. So there we go. So it's had a good trough, 100 baits. It's already had some swan mussels. Let's say it's a big fish. It's 30 pound. So then let's say 10 hours later, it goes down the other end of the lake, and it comes across a perfectly designed bait, a HMV bait that's perfectly designed to match the nutritional requirements of the carp. So it goes down there. So this is an 18-hour period that it's been swimming around the lake. And then it eats another 100 baits, let's say, another 18 mil baits. So there you go. That carp's had plenty of food that day. Plenty of food. How on earth is that carp going to distinguish which of those food items it's eaten that day is the one that's doing it the most good? It's not going to happen, is it? It's not going to happen. We can't even do that. Human beings can't do that whatsoever. Yeah, you might feel a bit better when you eat certain things or whatever, but that's a little bit different. It's not a recognition of what the perfect nutrition is. I mean, you've got all different issues going on. You can eat some foods that are a bit inflammatory, so it might make you, or whatever, you know, particularly if you've got arthritis or whatever, like I have. Eat certain things, it can make you a bit inflammatory. The arthritis might be a bit worse the next day. But there's no way in the world that that fish is going to know which of those items of food it's eaten on that particular day is the perfect nutrition for it to eat. So it's virtually impossible in a normal environment, a normal natural environment for a carp. It's virtually impossible for a carp to be able to discern which food items were the perfect nutrition. But as I say, I make these nutritional baits for the benefit of the carp. Like to think I'm giving something back to them. And also because lots of nutritional ingredients are extremely attractive especially fish meal, and they're extremely and some of them are extremely addictive. You know, caseins, whey proteins. Yeah, wheat's not particularly nutritional, but I believe it's addictive. So yeah. So as regards HMV baits, you'll obviously see me writing on my website that certain baits are high nutritional value. And most of my baits are high nutritional value. The Red Devil is the lowest protein bait that I sell, but that's particularly because it's been designed for winter, when I don't think they don't need a lot of protein in winter. Although the HXB, which is not low in protein, is effective in winter. The Red Devil is a carbohydrate bait for all intents and purposes. I think it's about 13% protein, the Red Devil. But it's an extremely effective bait all year round. You know, you can catch fish on that bait in summer, spring, autumn, and winter. So, you know, I don't really think that you do need I don't really think that you do need a bait that's high in protein, a boilie that's high in protein to catch carp if it's designed properly. So there we go. It's a little bit of a rundown as to why I still make high nutritional value baits. And the reason is, the primary reason now, which has changed since I actually created those baits. The primary reason now is because the ingredients that are critical to those mixes that make them high nutritional value baits are extremely, extremely attractive and extremely effective. So that's basically why I still make high nutritional value baits, but it doesn't mean that I'm an advocate of the HMV theory. I certainly don't think that the bait that's the perfect nutritional match for the carp's requirements will be the best catcher. It will not always be the best fish catcher. And it's unfortunate that I've got very, very few people using the Red Devil these days. Very few people. But at one time, which, you know, let's go back 8 years. Let's go back 8 years. I had a lot of people using the Red Devil bait, and there was a lot of fish getting caught on it. A lot of fish from different waters. You know, it caught a lot of fish from Trentham. It caught lots of fish from other waters, a lot smaller waters, a lot easier. It caught fish from Lynch Hill, Christchurch. It caught a lot of fish. It caught a lot of fish. And I caught fish from numerous waters on the Red Devil, you know, including some reasonably big fish. In fact, I would go as far to say I had a brace of 30s from a water in the Midlands on the first night that I ever fished it in 2015. And one of them was caught on the Red Devil. Yeah, it was a single. It was a single that I caught it on. It was 31.8 a mirror, and I caught it on a single match the hatch pop up. But you've got to remember, the match the hatch pop ups, they've got the base mix in. Got the base mix in, so it's not like a lure. It's not just like a straight pop up that's fairly inert and just relying on the attractors. It relies on the base mix. And I had a 31.8 mirror, and then I braced that in the morning with a 33.4 mirror. And I know for 100% that the 31.8 mirror that I had 8 years ago, that is now the second biggest mirror in the lake. So I didn't fish that water at the time. I wasn't a member, but I am now. So I don't know how big those two mirrors actually were in the grand scheme of things in that lake. The commons were bigger. So maybe I had two of the biggest mirrors in the lake, which I probably did in my first 24 hours on the lake. One was on the Red Devil and the other one was on Super Orange. And the one that I caught using the Super Orange was over bait. I had that on a match the hatch pop up over probably half a kilo or 18 millers. So it was a good result. I mean, I was actually ecstatic about that. The first night I've ever done an 18-acre gravel pit that wasn't that easy. In fact, it's probably harder than it is now. There was less fish in there then than there is now. And I had a brace of 30s, on 2 different baits. And as I say, that red devil bait, it's caught lots of fish from lots of different waters. It's had some really good results in the winter, but it's also had some very good results in the warmer months. And that bait was equally as effective as the Super Orange was on Trenton 12 months of the year. There's no two ways about it. And you've got to remember, the Super Orange was going in there at the same time as it was going in. So if this HMV theory was to be proven correct, then the fish would choose the Super Orange. So the anglers that were using the Super Orange on Trenton, which had been going in already for 4 years, so it's got an head start, the anglers that were using that would be catching more than the anglers that were using the Red Devil. And that just didn't happen. In fact, the Red Devil was catching fish that the Super Orange wasn't catching. It really was. It really was. Not just that parrot linear. There was a few others in there, the fully scaled and, different fish, the leather in there and stuff. So yeah. I mean, as I say, I'll be expanding on this to a far greater extent in the next book that I'm doing. This HMV theory thing, this opioid peptide thing, it will be getting expanded on massively. And as I say, this book's going to be a diving style piece. Now, as I've said before, they won't be the biggest fish in the world. Because I haven't caught the biggest fish in the world. I've caught 140-pound carp from England. Although I've caught 2 other fish that were 40s at the right time of the year, but when I caught them, they were just down in weight, which, I've done loads of times. I've caught a lot of big fish over the years, and they've been there below the ice weights. So, but it's just fishing, and it's just carp fishing. You go, you have these targets, you catch them. We can't always catch them when they're as full as a bed set, can we? So sometimes they're a little bit down in weight. But as I say, the next book, which will be called Beyond Fred, An Unexpected Journey, hopefully get completed by the end of January, after Christmas. Reckon I'll have it done for then. Unless I have a crazy surge in work after Christmas. I very much doubt it, because, we're coming into the quieter period now. Although I am still selling bait. I would estimate that I'll get that book done. In 2.5 months' time. Yeah, something like that. Should be done. So yeah, I mean, who knows how many I'll be till sell, but sold a few copies of the first book. People were interested in it. Because, as I've said before, even if you're not into making bait, you should really be interested in bait, and you should really be interested in getting some knowledge about bait. Because it helps you to choose what you're going to buy. If you're buying your bait off people, I suppose you could just buy what's catching, which a lot of people do, or what's supposedly the best bait. But a lot of it, you've got to remember. What you've got to remember is a lot of these results that people are seeing from bait, a lot of it's skewed by the number of anglers using the bait. Because let's be honest, hardly anybody uses my bait, and my bait's just caught a 63.11 and a 56.4 from 2 different lakes at 2 different ends of the country, boast the biggest fish in the lake, and they're the only anglers on the water using those baits. So I'll leave that open to your interpretation. So there we go. Another podcast. I have a little chat about a few things, and I'll probably do a few more of these, because I suppose it's easier than people reading. People can listen to them when they're driving the car, or when you're on the bank and you want to watch the water. You haven't got to read and take your eyes off the water. You just listen to these podcasts. So I'll keep firing them out. But as I say, going to be doing another book, because it's nice, isn't it? The written word in a book, it's nice. Didn't sell thousands of copies of the first book. Sold a fair few. Made a few quid on it. Not a millionaire. Made a few quid on it. Feedback was great. So, as I say, definitely gave me the motivation to write the next book. And that's what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be writing the next book. It's already written. Some of it is 50 pages. It'll probably be 200 pages, I would say, by the time I've finished it. So there we go. So hopefully you've enjoyed this. Another podcast. A little bit of an impromptu one. Just got home from work tonight. I thought, got a little bit of spare time. Do another podcast. And there we go. I've done it. So don't think it'll be long before I do another podcast because lots of things I want to chat about, but it won't be in the same amount of details it'll be in the book that I'm going to be doing. So there we go. Hopefully you've enjoyed it, and look out for the next one. Thanks, guys.